Hey, welcome back to this episode of Genuine Questions. There is a quote that I like that I see attributed to Aristotle, but I'm not sure if that's accurate, and I might butcher it here, but it's something to the effect of it's the mark of an educated mind to be able to consider an idea without necessarily adopting it as true. And that is sort of the overall point of what I would like to talk about today. Because what that quote means to me is that you can suspend whatever you believe is true and for the sake of a conversation with another person and believe what they think is true. And you can then, you might not agree with them, but you can at least see where they are coming from and understand their way of thinking, so you don't come to the conclusion that everyone who disagrees with you must be a terrible person. That maybe reasonable minds can differ on some issues, but if you don't ever talk to people who disagree with you and give them that benefit of the doubt in the conversation, then maybe what they're saying is true, and you just go in there in defensive attack mode to try to tell them that you are right and they are wrong, you are never going to understand where other people are coming from or understand what the other side of the issues are. With that in mind, I try to seek out conversations with people who do disagree with me to just kind of probe and see where along that train of thought our opinions start to differ. But honestly, those conversations are pretty hard to come by because it seems that most people take any sort of challenge to their belief system as an attack on them as a person, and so they just slash out at you for questioning them or making them question what they've already adopted as fact. I guess maybe another way to put it is when I go into conversations about these kind of topics, I go in under the assumption that I am wrong and trying to learn from these people and what they think, as opposed to going in with the assumption necessarily that I am right and trying to convince them how they are wrong. Now, sometimes when these conversations have happened, I hear the lesson that they are trying to teach me and I ask the questions, and I still walk away from it thinking that it sounded really dumb and did not change my mind. But I will always be convinced by a better argument, so I want to make sure that I hear as many arguments as possible, not just the ones that I believe to be true. I've mentioned a few of these issues in previous videos where I have really tried to step into the left liberal political narrative or viewpoint of the storyline and try to see like if it makes sense and what sort of logic they're following. And I've asked a few questions about things because even when I'm looking at from the left's perspective, the story doesn't make sense, and I still come away with thinking that the Democratic Party political establishment, mainstream media, are the bad guys. So I want to recap a couple that we've talked about previously and then discuss a few new ones that have recently come up in conversations that I've had with people that I think, to me at least, kind of put the big picture into perspective. So we can start by one of the first times where I really did not understand how a CNN, MSNBC, Me Too supporter, Democratic Party voter could see this issue was the Brett Kavanaugh hearing. Because, like I said, I have reasons to question that woman's story, but if I am suspending what I believe is true and just believing her because the news and the Democrats tell me I have to believe her, like, okay, she says in her testimony, as I'll show you this quick clip right here, that she did not want to come forward. Someone leaked her name to the press against her wishes to remain anonymous. And the only people that had that letter were the Democratic Party in California who she gave the letter to. They are also the ones with the motive to leak the letter because they had the political gain from stopping a Supreme Court nomination. So they had the letter, they had the means, and they had the motive. And nobody seemed concerned to know who went against this sexual assault victim's wishes and leaked her name to the press to benefit their own agenda.
My understanding is that Representative Eshu's office delivered a copy of my letter to Senator Feinstein's office on July 30th. The letter included my name, but also a request that it be kept confidential. My hope was that providing the information confidentially would be sufficient to allow the Senate to consider Mr. Kavanaugh's serious misconduct without having to make myself, my family, or anyone's family vulnerable to the personal attacks and invasions of privacy that we have faced since my name became public.
And it's not like this question wasn't asked and answered during the hearing that you watched, because I'll show you this clip right here just for fun. One of the Republican guys asked Dianne Feinstein to if she's the one that leaked the letter, because her office is the ones that had the letter, and she says no. And he says, well, have you asked him? And we're going to watch the entirety of the investigation that Dianne does into figuring out if her office leaked this letter.
Can you tell us that your staff did not leak it?
Oh, I don't believe my staff would leak it. I have not asked that question directly, but I do not believe
you know
they
that?
would.
I mean, how in the world could that get in the hands of the press?
The answer is no. The staff
Have you
said
asked
they did not.
Have you asked your staff or other
I
staff
just did.
members on the Judiciary Committee? Well, somebody leaked it if it wasn't you.
Well, it was, I'm telling you, it was not, I did not.
And so if you are a adult, reasonable-minded person who thinks about things and actually watched this hearing before you formed an opinion on it, instead of just going with whatever Saturday Night Live said was true, then you would maybe think that was a little suspicious. That maybe she was a little too defensive in that clip there. Maybe doesn't really make sense for it to be anybody else. And I'm supposed to believe that this is the political party that cares about women and the Me Too movement when they are willing to use it for politics. So now I want to read through this article that somebody shared on Facebook. And I thought it was incredibly interesting. It's long, so I just cut out screenshots of the parts that I'd like to comment on. But the overall gist of the article is that it was written by a game developer who was explaining to the readers how propaganda works in relation to the QAnon movement, and going on about the different psychological effects on how these people get manipulated by this propaganda of Q. And it's fascinating because the man is accurately and pretty perfectly describing how propaganda works and how it's used, but then doing this misdirection on people, telling you it's this QAnon that is the source of this propaganda. And we'll talk about it as we get into here. I am not saying that Q is true and is not propaganda. We will get into what I think about Q here in a minute, but it's just amazing to me how this article so accurately outlines how the process works, and people reading it still can't make the connections that we're going to talk about here to how this applies to way more things than just QAnon. But it's very clever at rewarding the reader by making them think that they are smart and they have figured out how propaganda works, and they have identified who the victims of it are. we know propaganda's out there, and I can tell you that it's the people that follow Q, so it definitely can't be me. I can't be a victim of propaganda because I'm calling out these other people to be victims of propaganda. The article is not leading you down the wrong path. It's leading you down the correct path and then putting up a sort of roadblock, so to speak, to not let you see that there is way more that you need to look into to this. It gets everybody to just be satisfied and stop at Q. So the first part of the article here, the difference is that these manufactured connections lead to the desired conclusions Q handlers have created. When players arrive at the correct answers, they are showered with adoration, respect, and social credit. The correct answer is the one that the group respects the most and makes the story the most enjoyable. The idea that bolsters the theory. What I noticed when I was reading this is that he says Q people get showered with adoration, respect, and social credit. There's a little bit more to this article that didn't make the screenshots, where he is talking about how that dopamine rush that people get from social acceptance and people, being popular and people liking you. So he is now trying to attribute that human nature, that need for acceptance, to what Q people's motivation. And I would just argue that I don't know anybody who believes in Q who gets showered with adoration, respect, and social credit. So I'm not saying that there's not something psychologically going on in the mind of people that might lead certain people down a more conspiratorial rabbit hole, but I'm not sure that adoration, respect, and social credit are these people's motives for doing such. If anything, to me, it seems like they are sacrificing the adoration, respect, and social credit by choosing to follow these online conspiracy theories instead of just going along with the majority socially accepted opinions, which Q is not a part of the mainstream opinions. Q is almost pure propaganda. That is the sole purpose of this. It's not advertising a product, it's not for fun, and it's not an art project. There's no doubt about the political nature of the propaganda either. And I had always heard, and at some points even suspected myself, that Q could have been like somebody messing around in their basement, just posting things on the internet. So I thought this was interesting because this article was shared on Facebook in response to somebody talking about the HBO documentary on Q called Into the Storm. And in that documentary, and what I hear a lot of people say about it is that it was started just by some internet tech kid and his dad, who are maybe like grifters or something. It's been a while since I've watched the documentary. But according to this article right here, and the person that was trying to have this conversation with this about, they are both making the point that it is like a political propaganda, like psychological operation. That's how the woman referred to it. She said Q was a psyop. That's sort of what this article is getting at too, that it's a political propaganda machine. And okay, if that's true, I actually don't disagree with that. So my follow-up question is, who do you think is behind this political propaganda machine? Who's benefiting from it? It's somebody. They're not just doing it for fun. So who politically benefits from a bunch of fringe conservatives, Republicans, alt-right people showing up in Dealey Plaza because they think that JFK Jr. is still alive and going to come out and announce himself as a 2024 political candidate, or whatever the Q stories that are in the news are these days, whatever they're up to. So who benefits from that? I think that is an interesting question to ask. Now, this part of the article here is a part that I actually wholeheartedly agree with. It's talking about the context here is why Q is probably not real And it says, real people in the government with important information to disseminate deliver it as fast as possible, usually all in one go. They don't make you solve things. They try to be as specific as possible. And I agree with that. The thing why I never got into Q stuff is because it's all written on this message board, and they never just come out and say what's going on and tell you. It's like clues and riddles you have to solve. And in my opinion, it's much like a horoscope where it is written just vague enough that whatever ends up happening, you can go back and be like, oh, well, must be what that clue was referring to. So to answer my own question from the previous slide, I do think that Q is a psyop. I think the people that benefit politically from it are not necessarily the Democratic Party, but the career politicians who are trying to hang on to their stranglehold on power over the past 60 years, and they don't like that their corruption is being exposed. So you do a psyop where you take the true allegations and you mix them with wild, crazy conspiracy theories like Hillary drinking the blood of children to stay young, or Donald Trump secretly being a shadow president that's like in secret control of the military and any day gonna come and get Joe Biden out of office. You conflate the absurd with the true, and then you can paint everything that is not the mainstream media narrative with this broad brush that if you question anything, now it's, oh, are you a Pizzagator? What, you're QAnon? And then they just mock everything that you say, even though I've never once looked at QAnon myself. The second thing that I think it accomplishes is sending people down these crazy rabbit holes that lead to nowhere, so they're not spending their time investigating the actual true allegations of corruption that there's evidence for. And then finally, I think it keeps people complacent because people thought that things were happening behind the scenes and they weren't going to take matters into their own hands to fight the corruption and the tyranny that's going on, because the powers that be, the forces for good, were working against this evil plot and they didn't want to do anything that might mess it up. It's Q is in charge. So nothing really happened, and they were able to stage their soft coup to get Trump out. And that's why you had things like the Durham report and people on Fox News like Sean Hannity saying, oh, just be patient, 2 weeks, we're going to lock her up in 2 weeks, and blah, 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 blah. It's always perpetually 2 weeks away, so people think things are actually happening and the ball's moving and we just have to be patient. Another extremely important reason for propagandists to get people to do the research is to instill a natural distrust for society in the competency of others. The research has already been done by thousands of trained professionals. The FBI, CIA, and countless nonprofits dedicated to solving the issues of trafficking and abuse have already been working on these issues for decades. I'd like to interject here that if the allegation is that the FBI and the CIA are involved in the human trafficking, then that would explain why people aren't satisfied with the FBI and the CIA's reports on how it goes down. Do your own research means don't trust other people. Don't trust institutions. Listen to me. And that just makes me laugh because that's the exact opposite of what do your own research means. It's saying go look into it for yourself. It's not saying listen to me. When you say listen to me to somebody, you're telling them don't go do your own research. I've already done it and I'll just tell you what it says. Encouraging somebody to go do your own. You can say whatever you want to discredit people that say go do your own research, except for this. This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. It is the exact opposite of listen to me. And I don't know what they mean by don't trust institutions. So if Adolf Hitler is the head of the FBI, I'm supposed to trust the institution of the FBI because it's an institution? That institutions can't be corrupted? Like, institutions are only as good as the people that comprise them. The marketing and PR are intense. Influencers are out there posting every day. People they like Q. Q makes sure of this. This isn't happening on the dark corners of the internet. but on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. I don't know what the PR and marketing campaigns are for Q. I don't know if I've ever seen one, but I also do know that all these social media platforms that they are talking about they ban Q groups from being on them, and will block your post if you post about it. So I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure he's wrong about this, where if you want to look up Q stuff, I think you do have to go to the dark corners of the internet. I'm not sure that these are on the mainstream public platforms, is where you're going to run into a Q indoctrinator. This article shows the hashtag maps of Q's complete overtaking of the Wayfair conspiracy theory. Everything is in play now. Every weird coincidence is a puzzle to be solved. It is increasingly hard to separate Q from those worried about postal voter fraud or Bill Gates. It's just latching itself on to anything. So, just so everybody's on notice, if you have questions about election integrity, or the moral character of Bill Gates, you're a part of Q now. It's all the same, and we will be coming back to this point here in a couple of minutes, but I want to take a quick detour to talk about Wayfair, since this article brings it up. Because for anybody who does not remember, a couple years ago, there were these allegations that came out that Wayfair, was the online furniture store, was engaged in human trafficking. And it very quickly, like within an hour, was definitively debunked. And Snopes did a really great fact check about it, which I want to share with you. And then also USA Today touches on just a couple of other things. So we're going to go through these two fact checks and just talk about Wayfair for a second. So here we go from the fact-checking gurus, Snopes. Is Wayfair trafficking children via overpriced items? The claim that Wayfair is trafficking children is based almost entirely on one person's confusion over an expensive cabinet. And Snopes tells you this story is false. In July 2020, some social media users accused the furniture store Wayfair of trafficking children. This gravely serious accusation was not based on police reports, first-hand accounts, financial records, or deep investigative reporting. Rather, it was based on the fact that some items on Wayfair were listed at exorbitant prices compared to other similar items. The post noted that Wayfair was selling utility closets from WFX that were priced at more than $10,000 and offered child trafficking as a possible explanation. This post led to other users combing the Wayfair website in search of other oddities. One Twitter user found a set of pillows and shower curtains that were listed for $9,999. As similar items on the website were listed for only $99, this person assumed that the only logical explanation was that the higher price items were being used to traffic children. The images showing expensive cabinets and large price differentials on pillows, shower curtains, and other items on Wayfair's website are real. However, it takes quite a leap in logic to arrive at the conclusion that this evidence is that the store is engaged in child trafficking. The more we pondered this claim, the more nonsensical it appeared. Would a large business really use their official website to allow people to purchase children online? As these items are available to anyone with internet access, wouldn't it be possible for someone to accidentally become involved in child trafficking? Why would a child trafficking operation use a method that would be so easy to track? And good for Snopes for pondering those questions. I did too, and the conclusion that I came to is not that, as we'll see here in a minute, that they like to make the allegation seem absurd. And it was said that you bought a cabinet and you opened it up and there was a kid inside. That's how they were engaged in child trafficking. Where I think the much more real world obvious way that this is being done is that the Wayfair is money laundering. That you purchase one of these high price items and it shows up on your credit card as a purchase from Wayfair, which is a legitimate company that nobody would question there being a charge for. So when Snopes asks why would a child trafficking operation use a method that would be so easy to track, it's not so easy to track. It's hiding in plain sight. it would actually be incredibly difficult to prove that the charge wasn't to actually Wayfair. And the other question here that they ask on, are these items available to anybody with internet access? Just keep that question in the back of your mind, because that is going to get addressed in the USA Today fact check that we will look at second. So, Wayfair told Newsweek in a statement that there is, of course, no truth to these claims. Wayfair noted that these were industrial-grade cabinets and they had been accurately priced. Wayfair said that they temporarily removed these items as the accompanying descriptions did not accurately explain the reason for the price point. So basically the sum total of Wayfair's investigation into this debunking that they have done is they called the president of the company that was accused and said, "Hey, are you trafficking kids?" And he said no. And Wayfair said, "Okay, that makes sense to us." And they debunked this. And case closed. End of the story. I think the money laundering thing, even if it's not a human trafficking operation that they are covering up, they clearly, it seems money laundering, because what Wayfair does not address in that statement is they talk about the industrial cabinets. Is there an industrial shower curtain that is worth $10,000? Are there industrial throw pillows that are worth $10,000? Because all of those items were listed for those kinds of prices as well. It was not just the industrial grade cabinets. But that is what Snopes and Wayfair singularly focused on in their explanation and justification. And it does not explain the other items that were for sale on their website. Then USA Today supplements this fact check with, "Conspiracy theorists point to Wayfair products that are listed for thousands of dollars and identified by human names and connect those to reports of missing children with the same names as evidence that these children are being sold online. They believe that after the transaction is completed, a child, not the furnishing, will be delivered to the buyer." USA Today interviewed one specific couple for this article. Said he also expressed suspicion about a call he said he received from Wayfair after he placed the order, in which a customer service representative asked whether he wanted to open a free Wayfair Professional account. Wayfair Professional offers members-only pricing, a personal account manager, and deals according to its application website. The Arizona Republic was unable to reach a Wayfair representative who could explain this program in greater detail. So, no, I don't think random people could just accidentally buy a $10,000 shower curtain online and get a kid delivered instead. It sounds like when you purchase one of these items, you get a call from this Wayfair Professional subgroup that they have. And I imagine they probably have a list of pre-approved customers who typically buy these very expensive shower curtains and throw pillows. And if your name is not on this list of pre-approved customers, you probably get one of these phone calls so they can check you out. And if you really wanted to spend $17,000 or whatever on a shower curtain and you just insisted and they weren't able to vouch for you being a part of their little side program, then I imagine they would just go take the $10 shower curtain off the shelf and sell it to you for a ginormous profit. That human trafficking is the most profitable industry in the entire globe. It's black market, it's hard to track, so you have to move that money somehow. You have to have a way to hide in plain sight. And I'm just saying, if this is not how they are doing this, that they are not using these type of websites like Wayfair, Amazon, and other places where third-party eBay or third-party sellers can get on and list items for whatever they want. So you have an official transaction that you bought a Princess Diana Beanie Baby for $50,000. So you can process all of this money and move this money legitimately. They should be doing it. It's a good plan. Because I think the real answer here is that people are unwilling to see trafficking as it actually happens, yet are eagerly willing to make stuff up about it. Bridget Carr, a professor of law at University of Michigan and head of the Human Trafficking Clinic, told USA Today. Can we see the effects of labor trafficking on Wayfair? Yes. Who is making the really cheap throw pillow or furniture that's arriving at your home in Amazon boxes? Those are the real questions that need to be asked. This is so convoluted. Sandy Scalani, an anti-trafficking expert and lecturer at University International Florida, told USA Today. It's unfortunately so much easier to traffic somebody than to create an entire furniture catalog around it. When we make human trafficking this super exotic thing that only takes place if you're kidnapped or sold for sex, we exclude all the ways that people like you and me are contributing to forced labor in this country and around the world, she emphasized. I just thought that was interesting because we have talked about in previous episodes how sometimes these organizations that pretend that they are doing good works are actually nefarious organizations that are hiding in plain sight. And I'm very suspicious of these two women who both claim to be human trafficking advocates and experts, and yet when an issue like this gets brought up to them, which seems like a pretty ingenious way of laundering this kind of money, they immediately pivot to the real problem is child labor. And that's what we should be focused on. Like, why would you, people are but focused on your life's work. You have the spotlight. Why would you not want to capitalize on this? Why are you pivoting away to a different issue? Not that child labor is not an important issue, but you're not a child labor expert. You're a human trafficking expert, and that's what people are trying to talk to you about. So why are you deflecting to something else? And there's room for both child labor and child trafficking concern. And I've also been hit back with the counter argument that this isn't how human trafficking really happens. That, it's, family members and people that you know. And I'm not disputing that. I'm sure it is more likely that people are abused and taken advantage of by somebody that they do know and have a connection to. And that's how they've gained your trust and then taken advantage of it. But that does not mean that this other type of global human trafficking doesn't also happen. So why is there not room to focus on both? Why does it have to be one or the other? And when it comes to the global human trafficking, that's where you get into the money laundering, and that's what this topic is about. This isn't the mental anguish that happens to somebody who is abused by one of their relatives, that's a sick person. There's no financial trail to follow and investigate. You just have to wait until somebody comes forward. So why not take advantage of these type of leads, these very suspicious activity, and investigate that, and at least try to cut off one of the tentacles of the child sex abuse issue. Back to the initial article we were reading through. So the more people try to shut it down, the more the Q runners double down, getting even bigger endorsements from the top politicians in the world. This is a media campaign. This is coordinated propaganda. This is even a full-length movie out, paid for out of pocket, that is being distributed for free to spread the word. Hundreds of publications for sale on Amazon. This is a lot of work. This isn't how anything but media advertising propaganda campaigns work. And I would just like to say, when I read that, that sounds a lot to me like the propaganda campaign going on with coronavirus. As you're walking around the grocery store, every 2 minutes or whatever the frequency is, where they're reminding you social distance, put on your mask, wash your hands. They're giving you, free vaccines, and not just, free, but also here's your Krispy Kreme donut. Here's whatever. Here's your free car wash. Those things don't just happen. That takes a lot of work to reach out to those businesses and to create those type of propaganda campaigns to try to advertise and convince people to do something. So I see way more inundating the public with that type of information than I've ever seen coming from QAnon. says QAnon needs this kind of media saturation because it's not a natural movement. People need to be surrounded by it on all sides. It needs to seem popular even when it absolutely isn't. It needs to seem like everyone is talking about it. They need to see it on YouTube, TikTok, in the papers, in the news, and hear it from their friends. This is all part of making it feel real. So, as they said, it needs to be surrounded by people on all sides. It needs to seem like the popular opinion even when it isn't. And so I want to remind everybody of this montage here of all of the 6 major news organizations that just repeat the same exact catchphrase on every single show, every single program. Doesn't matter what channel you turn it to, people are saying the same thing. You are surrounded by it on all sides. It seems really popular because everybody's saying it, but really it's just, the 3 people that own all of the media companies are telling everybody to say it. You have no idea if this is what regular people think. It's just what these powers that be think, and then write the script for all of their many subsidiary news programs.
All state that this is a manufactured crisis, and a crisis that manufactured by the Trump administration.
This is a manufactured crisis, Bill.
How he manufactures crises like immigrants seeking legal refuge.
What the president is doing is manufacturing a crisis.
President Trump must stop holding the American people hostage, must stop manufacturing a crisis.
This president just used the backdrop of the Oval Office to manufacture a crisis.
Folks, the president has manufactured one heck of a political crisis for himself.
Donald Trump is manufacturing a national security crisis.
You will hear them say is that this is a manufactured crisis. It's not a national security crisis.
From Nancy Pelosi down to Debbie Wasserman Schultz or anybody else who will give him a dime for this project.
Because it's manufactured.
It's a manufactured crisis for the president to get a political win.
We have a president who will go on TV tonight and lie and lie and lie some more. This is a manufactured crisis.
Solving a tough puzzle in a game is a huge rush, but in Q, it's even more so because it's real. They're writing about you in every magazine. You're on the news. Participants haven't solved a game. They've solved reality. So this, in relation to the last paragraph that we just read, if you need that media attention to be indoctrinated, and as they're saying here, that they're writing about you on the news, you're in every magazine. Couldn't you make the argument that the media is now created this boogeyman that they are now protecting us from? That if it weren't for the media talking about them all the time and giving them this spotlight, that then it wouldn't be able to indoctrinate people? That it would just be some people playing Nancy Drew on 4chan and it wouldn't have this huge effect on society. It seems to me, if you make that connection, it's the media's fault. Create the beast that now you can protect us from. And that beast is online conspiracy theorists who have absolutely no power. People make the connection before they know for a fact if it's real or not. It's a hypothesis, a theory. Then you test it, and the facts determine the outcome, and then, whether it feels good or not, you accept them. Even scientists may not want to let go of a good theory that just isn't panning out. Solutions need to be tested and the facts harnessed. I would again like to relate this back to what's going on right now with COVID, that scientists might not want to let go of a good theory, and maybe that has something to do with why the CDC isn't releasing the vaccine data for people 18 to 50, because the data doesn't support what they thought was a really good theory. And just like this article says, that they might not be willing to let go of their good theory. It's unfortunate that that's happening, but it's even more unfortunate that people can recognize it and use it to ostracize and shame people who spend their time talking on online message boards and not turning that focus onto people that actually have power over our lives, like the pharmaceutical companies and government officials. QAnon is an attempt to create a new reality. If they can do that, then they can do anything they want and blame the outcome on any fictional plot point they choose. One tentacle of a many-pronged attack of the Boogaloo Bros, QAnons, anti-maskers, fake news, Alex Jones, etc., is to scattershot programs all with the same message and the same endgame. To doubt reality. To create the fog of war without the war. To create a collectively shared reality that they directly control. And I just, again, think that is amazing that right here, all in this one paragraph, they do the thing they're accusing the other side of doing. They're saying that QAnon, just blame anything they want. They can point the finger at anybody they choose. Already in this article, the person who wrote it has pointed the finger at people concerned with election integrity and people who are concerned about the power Bill Gates has over us that point the finger at you as being a QAnon. And now we've got Boogaloo Bros, QAnon, anti-maskers, fake news, Alex Jones, etc. Anybody that says anything that we don't like is now QAnon. So it's almost like the powers that be have created this fictional reality that QAnon and Alex Jones are the evil, bad people, not us, the ones who have been in power for 60 years and haven't done anything to make your lives better and now desperately clinging to whatever relevancy we have left. It's not them. They're not the bad guys. It's definitely Alex Jones and the person not wearing a mask at the grocery store are the evil people in this world. Because from what I see in history, propaganda is used by the powerful to manipulate the majority of the public into believing what they want to believe. It's not historically carried out by the fringes of society who just like to mess with people and get them all riled up and mad at each other for no reason. There's a motivation for doing this to people. And that is why, based on the absurdity of what we are being told in the present day, and when you put it into the historical context, I don't think that blaming the online conspiracy theorists while parroting what you hear on every single cable news station. I think if you're focused on the latter, or I'm sorry, if you're focused on the former and not the latter, you might be a victim of some of the propaganda. I had another conversation just a week or two ago with trying to, again, get into this mindset of people who I don't necessarily agree with. And it was a conversation on Facebook, and it got into socialism. And it was a conversation between Brian and Doug. And Brian asked Doug, can you give me one example of a successful socialist country? And Doug responds, no, because every time people have tried, the United States has come in and bombed that country and labeled them communist, and then bombed their country and installed a leader in there that they could control, because America is just a bunch of greedy capitalists. And they didn't want there to be a successful example of socialism. Okay, if that is what you think the United States has historically been doing, I can see why you might think that there's never been a successful example of socialism. But here's what I don't understand. If you think, and I know from prior conversations that this Doug person is very proud of the fact that he has voted for Joe Biden. And so when I then asked, then I chimed into the conversation to ask Doug. I said, all right, so if this is what you believe, then, and that has been going on for 60, 80 plus years, where we have just labeled countries communist and then gone and bombed them just to thwart their socialist utopia. In order for that to be true, the American news media has to be in on it. Because the news doesn't tell us that. They tell us USA, number one, we're out there spreading freedom and democracy. So you have to believe that the news media lies to protect the established career politicians. And if that is what you believe, can you explain to me why, when it comes to domestic issues and telling you that everybody that doesn't vote the same way that you do is some sort of racist, white supremacist, moron, that the news media is telling you the truth about that? That they don't lie to you when it comes to domestic issues, and you can believe every word they say about what's happening in America. They only lie to you about stuff that happens in foreign countries. That that's where I'm having a little trouble following Doug's train of thought. And also, another roadblock that I hit here is, if you think that Joe Biden, who has been in office for 60 years and has voted in favor of all of these wars that we were lying about our motives for going into, and it was just for, our own selfish self-interest, why would you think that Joe Biden would be interested in bringing socialism to the United States? Why would you have believed him when he campaigned on that? Because it seems like your other accusation of Joe Biden is that he has spent 60 years in Washington, D.C., bombing socialist countries so capitalism doesn't look bad. And the media has had his back and lied for him, and now all of a sudden you're proud that you voted for him because at least you might get some socialism. Why would you assume that Joe Biden means any of that and that he wasn't just lying to you and pandering to you so the progressive Bernie bros didn't stay home like they did in 2016 for Hillary? And the response that I got back to that question was that Doug will never understand how somebody can claim to be against the coastal elite and vote for a New York City real estate developer over the former First Lady of Arkansas. So I don't think Doug has put enough thought into this issue. Then in light of recent current events going on, just the last little liberal logic I have trouble following is this whole narrative that Donald Trump works for Putin. As we'll go back to refresh our memories here, I'll show you this video from the impeachment where the ambassador to Ukraine says that Trump was giving the Ukrainians more aid than the Obama administration, and then was also giving missiles, javelins that they were using to blow up Russian tanks. So I'm not sure how you can square that in your mind that Donald Trump works for Putin, but was also arming Putin's enemies. And now coincidentally, 1 year into Joe Biden's first term, Putin's invading Ukraine, which is something he didn't do at all when his puppet Donald Trump was in office. He did it with Crimea when Obama was in office, didn't do it for 4 years when his puppet was in office, and now he's doing it when Joe Biden's in office.
In terms of defensive lethal aid, which you were an advocate for, that was not provided by President Obama. It was provided by President Trump.
That's correct.
You've testified that during your tenure as ambassador, America's policy actually got stronger toward Ukraine. Is that accurate?
With the provision of javelins to the Ukrainian military, yes, that was really positive.
And why was that important?
They are obviously tank busters. And so if the war with Russia all of a sudden accelerated in some way and tanks come over the horizon, javelins are a very serious weapon to deal with that. That's number one. But really the more important issue is the symbolism of it, that the United States is providing javelins to Ukraine. That makes Ukraine's adversaries think twice.
And isn't it the case that the Trump administration has indeed provided substantial aid to Ukraine in the form of defensive lethal aid, correct?
That is correct.
And that is more so than the Obama administration, correct?
Yes.
And those javelins were not made available to Ukraine under the Obama administration?
They were not.
So we could do a whole episode on theories on what's going on with Russia and Ukraine and the United States and the geopolitical atmosphere right now. I can only speak for myself when I say that I am very skeptical of really anything that the current administration and the news media tells us and pushes at us and surrounds us with on all sides. It's the way this article says that propaganda is done. For now, I'm just going to hang back and hold off on forming an opinion about what's going on, and instead just ask a few genuine questions about everybody's motives and what they stand to lose and gain in this current situation. And I hope you guys tune in for those future episodes. And real quick, by the way, before I sign off. I did start posting these videos on Rumble now too, and just want to say I'm not sure who the people are that watch this on Rumble, but you guys leave very nice and supportive comments, and I do read those, and they mean a lot. So thank you for the positive feedback and support, and I hope you guys follow and keep watching.